Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation. It's the great debate, but only if you join in. That's why, above all, I need your telephone calls. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0, or I'll have to move swiftly on because no one will understand either of us. The telephone number, therefore, for you to ring is 44-208-601-4555. And you can SMS the show on 447800008066, and you can email me, of course, as always, at comment@presstv.co.uk. And this being 2014, you can even send me a tweet, and the Twitter is comment_PressTV. So, by one means or another, I want to talk to plenty of you, however you're watching us, wherever you're watching us, and whatever your point of view. Indeed, if it differs from mine, as you know, I quite like that. So the two questions this evening are this: where is the situation in Ukraine headed? I must say it's getting ever more complex. The military junta in Kiev, which came to power in a coup d'etat involving the driving out of the elected president, the setting fire to the presidency and the parliament, the occupation and destruction of key government buildings, and then the threatening with death to members of parliament if they did not agree to rip up the Ukrainian constitution. This was swiftly followed by the very first law that the new power in Kiev introduced, which was to ban the Russian language. Not just an offence to the country next door, the Russian Federation, but more importantly, quite an offence to the 47% of the population of Ukraine who are Russian speakers. Many of them, in fact, Russian citizens, Russian nationals, the very compatriots of the Russian Federation next door. Everybody knows what happened in Crimea. The people in the autonomous Republic of Crimea decided that if autonomous meant anything at all, it meant the right to say, bye, we are out of here. And indeed, that's now history. No one even talks about it. But what happened in East and South Ukraine, where the Russian-speaking Ukrainians live, is that the people there decided they owed absolutely no loyalty to a group of people in Kiev who had come to power in a putsch, in a revolution, as they would describe it. So they took to the barricades too. They occupied buildings just like the revolutionaries in Kiev had done. And they armed themselves just like the revolutionaries in Kiev had done. The difference is, if you do it in Kiev against a president and a government that the West doesn't like, you're a hero. If you do it in Slavyansk or Donetsk or in Odessa, then you're an enemy of the state. You're an enemy of the people. And above all, you're an enemy of the Western media, who treat them as if they were terrorists. And indeed, there has been quite a bit of terrorism breaking out and spreading in the Ukraine. In Odessa, just a few days ago, in a trade union hall, 45 trade unionists were burned to death by a group of people, the most important or significant of which was the right sector, the openly, overtly fascist Nazi organization, which does most of the heavy lifting for the junta in Kiev. And indeed, the other right-wing party, Svoboda, and the right sector together are, by any standards, any kind of definition, the cutting edge of the Kiev revolution. So the people in the East and the South decided they were going to have a referendum on autonomy, and they were almost certain to vote in overwhelming numbers either to break away from Ukraine, as Crimea had done, or at the very least demand a federal autonomy whereby their part of Ukraine could look to the east as the western part of Ukraine might well look to the west. Then came a rather surprising announcement by President Putin, the president of Russia, who announced yesterday and confirmed it again this morning that he didn't want these referenda on autonomy to go ahead. He called for them to be delayed. He also called on the junta in Kiev to halt their military operations against the people of the east and the south of the country. And the previous warnings that he'd given that he would have to intervene to protect them if the situation got out of hand have not been withdrawn. But Putin's call was unequivocal. There should be no referenda this weekend. Unfortunately for him, and maybe not just for him, the people have already gone too far. And the Ukrainians who are organizing the referendum have announced this afternoon that it's going ahead, whether President Putin likes it or not. So, a complex situation, but a simple question. Where is the situation in Ukraine headed, in your opinion, of course? Now, I'm told to insist that you answer these questions. We don't just want comment on Ukraine in general. Neither do we just want comment on Syria in general, because the second question is equally important. And it's this: have Western plots in Syria failed? I'll tell you why we're asking. Because as the United Nations organized the evacuation of the last remaining militants in Aleppo, where some of the most ancient treasures of civilization have been destroyed, the city completely ruined, and tens of thousands of the citizens killed, hundreds of thousands of them driven out of the city. Finally, the foreign-backed, mainly foreign militants have now withdrawn under United Nations protection and by agreement and negotiation with the government in Damascus. And if it's happened in Homs, it's very soon going to be complete in Aleppo. In Aleppo, there is now only one district out of 8 which is any longer controlled by these militants. And that one district is not likely to remain a militant stronghold for very much longer. So within the next days, we're going to have a situation where from Latakia all the way to the Lebanese border, and including Homs, Aleppo, and Damascus itself, this militant uprising and invasion by foreign forces will have been fatally weakened. Now, the people who paid for it all have got plenty of money to burn. They probably won't have noticed too much of a hole in their gigantic bank balances in the money that they have expended. But politically, I predict it's going to cost them a very great deal more, because it's my belief that the vast majority of people in the Arab and Muslim world will be happy that the government in Syria has survived this onslaught. Not because they necessarily love the regime in Damascus, but that they hate and fear the enemies of that regime much, much more. And that certainly goes for me. So the second question, and again, I have to insist that you give me an answer to it: have Western plots in Syria failed? Or do you think they either weren't Western plots to begin with, or that they haven't failed? Let me have your point of view. By phone, text, or email. Nasir is in London. Where is the situation in Ukraine headed, Nasir, in your view?
Yes, good evening, George.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Welcome.
I love it. Anyway, basically we're facing the same story again, and the same players. They are all the same players who are involved in Syria, in Lebanon, in the Arab world, Ukraine, etc., etc. So this is the work of possibly 30 years ahead. They planned it, the destruction of Syria, of Russia. They're trying to get rid of the communism. They succeeded. Now, after Russia will be China, and then they won it. Now, we're facing this global elite, what I call global elite, the rulers. They are everywhere. basically country after country after country. And in the same way, basically the destruction of, the world, if you like. Those people, they must be stopped.
Well, it's not going very well, Nasir. If that's your thesis, your hypothesis, it's not working out very well, because these rulers have failed in Syria. They failed with Iran. They failed with Crimea. And they are failing with Ukraine. And the last time I looked, Russia and China were getting stronger, not weaker. So where is the situation specifically in Ukraine headed, in your view? What's going to happen next?
Well, hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yes, well, like I said, they started with Ukraine to get to Russia. Because when you say they're getting stronger, yes, they are getting stronger. But once they get to near their borders, the west, then they won't get stronger. And once they finish with Russia, they will go to China.
No, they'll never. But this is my point. This is my point, Nasir. This is far too formulaic, far too conspiracy-minded. They're not going to get anywhere near Russia's border in Ukraine. I guarantee you that. They're never going to be finished with Russia, and they wouldn't dare touch China. Stop painting them as if they were supermen. They're not James Bonds. They're Austin Powers. Let's go to Baz in Los Angeles. Always worth talking to. Baz, where do you think the situation in Ukraine is headed now?
Unfortunately, George, looking at Ukraine the way it is today, it's starting to look a lot more like one of these Central American states in the 1980s, even though it's 10,000 miles away. So basically you have a couple sides, one supported by the United States, which is ready and willing to take up arms and shed as much blood as it can. The motivations for that, of course, are the almighty dollar, as they always are. I liked your idea. I heard the program a week ago or a couple weeks ago to federalize Ukraine. Of course, that would be the best option. But as far as the United States government is concerned, and United States weapons manufacturers, oil companies, and agricultural companies are concerned, that would be unacceptable. And especially for the people in the State Department who helped, organize this little coup that we had in Kiev. Because, as you well know, George, our public officials, as a reward for doing their service to the Fortune 500 companies, get nice little cushy jobs once they leave Washington, and they're dependent on those jobs, and the millions they get. So I don't think that, with the vested stakes that are in Ukraine now, that the United States is just going to give up. And,
well, it's interesting you say that, and I'd like to press you, because I respect you. I'd like to press you for some guidance on this. I was listening on the BBC earlier this evening to the current American ambassador in Kiev, and he was, of course, the successor to Victoria Nuland, who is now at the State Department, who revealed that the United States has spent $5 billion on what she called the promotion of democracy in Ukraine. Of course, the paradox doesn't seem to have occurred that the United States money was spent actually on overthrowing democracy, subverting democracy. But as I listened to the American ambassador waxing lyrical, metaphorically wagging his finger, making demands, issuing démarches, requiring this, insisting upon that, I found myself shouting at the radio, what does Ukraine actually have to do with you? What business of it, of the United States, thousands and thousands of miles away, what business is it of yours? What happens in Ukraine? Does that question ever emerge even in the United States media? Does anyone at all on any news bulletin just raise that basic question? well, you know, we don't have money to burn. How come we found so much money to burn in Ukraine? Does that ever come up, Baz?
No, that's never part of the narrative, George. Obviously not, because that's not how the Orwellian media system works. I mean, for the Americans who do care and do pay attention, getting their information from the American news media obviously is not, one of the best sources for the truth.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you know how it is. 80% of the people in this country are either not interested, don't even know where Ukraine is, or they're, honestly, George, struggling to make a living and,
yeah, sure. But one of the reasons they're struggling, Baz, is that billions of their dollars are being thrown at fascists and ultra-nationalists in Ukraine.
Well, the people who control the money would disagree with you, George. They would say that those dollars are theirs, not ours.
What about politicians, Baz? Any political figures of any note raising any queries about this?
Only Ron Paul, from what I have seen in the media. But, you know, George, before last year, before our country was about to bomb Syria, just, very few days before and after the fact that British Parliament rejected the idea in your country, I sent a letter to my congressman, my supposed representative to the federal government, telling him the facts of the case, and he replied with a very kind of typical sociopathic, sycophantic reply, saying that they're thinking about, this poor Syrian people who have been victimized by Bashar Assad. And, it's just typical of, the kind of attitude here in the United States government.
You and I need to get together and see if we can't forge some kind of third way out there in the United States. Baz, in Los Angeles, a pleasure, as always, to talk to you. Now, Abbas is in Parzabad in Iran on the subject of Syria. Abbas, welcome to the show. Can you hear me? I can hear myself, so that means the volume on your TV isn't down at 0.
Hello, George.
Yes, hello, Abbas. Go ahead.
I'm so happy to see you again and to talk to you again.
The honor is mine. Please go ahead. Speak up.
First of all, I'm going to ask you a question about Iran. I just want to know your personal idea about Iran.
Well, I'll be happy to give you my personal ideas about Iran anytime, but not right now, Abbas, because the question before you is, have Western plots in Syria failed? Follow me on Twitter or Facebook, or send me an email, and I'll be happy to tell you my views on Iran. But do you have a point you'd like to make on the Syrian imbroglio, on the Syrian war?
Do you have a...
No, I'm going to have to press on. Abbas and others, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be at 0. Or, as I've just done, I have to move on. Des is in London. Let me ask him the same question. Have Western plots in Syria failed? Des, welcome.
Hello, George. Thank you.
Welcome. Go ahead.
I believe they have, to a point, failed. I think in Syria, they've succeeded in just about destroying the whole of the country, the infrastructure, the towns, the small towns and the cities. I mean, just look at Homs, the mess they've left it in, and also Aleppo, which they still hold a part of. In Ukraine, it's a different kettle of fish. You talked earlier to the chap in America, and you asked what are the politicians saying, and you also asked what right of America to be in Ukraine. Well, the fact is, we are no longer nation states run by politicians and governments. It's corporations who are running the show now, and it's the corporations and the bankers the big banks who stand to make money and make capital out of the destruction of Ukraine and Syria. They're going to do to Ukraine what they've already done to Greece and what they've done to Spain. They're going to rip it apart. They've given it a huge loan, I believe, in the past couple of days from the IMF, and that will have to be paid back in kind. They're going to have to slash pensions, benefits, food prices are going to rocket, gas prices will rocket. The Ukrainian people just will not know what has hit them. So in a way, yes, they have won, but it's not all over yet, because there is resistance. And I don't know if they expected this resistance, which is happening in the East.
Well, it's very interesting, Des. I agree with a lot of what you said, but perhaps not the state of mind that lay behind it, and I'll tell you what I mean on that in a minute. But first of all, it wasn't a huge loan. It was $1 billion. The Ukraine has debts of $14 billion. So that $1 billion is first a mere drop in the ocean just on this year's level of indebtedness, and is much less, of course, than President Putin already offered and was in the process of giving to Ukraine before the coup d'etat, the crisis followed by the coup d'etat, and the situation we have now. Secondly, I'm not sure where they're going to get their price from, Des. It's true that they have already cut the value of pensions, benefits, and so on. They'll definitely, you're right, they will impoverish the people of Ukraine. But Western Ukraine actually doesn't produce anything. It doesn't have any oil. It doesn't have any gas. It doesn't have any industry. Kiev's a very beautiful city, so maybe a bit of tourism, but that's it. As you know, because you're a smart man, all the productive capacity in Ukraine is in the east and in the south. And that's the part that is resisting and will continue to resist and will not allow itself to become the cash cow for a pro-Western west of Ukraine. I'll tell you where I part company with you. And I hear people say it a lot, that governments don't run countries, corporations do. I don't accept that at all. Certainly the politicians are in the pockets of the corporations. That's true. But they could equally be forced, and if they can't be forced, we need to change the politicians, to tell the corporations where to get off. After all, it's not the corporations that are running Russia. It's President Putin, the elected president, who's running Russia, and actually the oligarchs are one by one ending up behind bars. It's not the corporations that are running Iran. It's not the corporations that are running Venezuela. It's the elected politicians who are. And I'll tell you why I'm dwelling on the point, Des. Because I've often heard it said that, well, what could President Obama do? He's not really in power. It's really the corporations. No, he could have, should have, ought to have, could still yet, if he had any sense, assert the democratic power and the mandate that the people of the United States have given to him. And that's a demand we must make of all our political leaders. We mustn't allow them the cop-out of saying, actually, they don't really run things. It's really the corporations. Des, you're a smart man. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. I have to go now for just 3 minutes, I think, for a short news bulletin. By the grace of God, I'll be back right after that. The questions that we're asking tonight are what lies ahead for Ukraine this weekend, this perilous pass that we have reached in the Ukraine. And have the Western plots against Syria finally failed? Or is there more, much more blood still to be shed there? So, don't go away. In just 3 minutes, God willing, I'll be back here for the second half of Comment. I promise you, you will not want to have missed it. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV. Still the voice of the voiceless. Now, out of the mouths of babes, you'll recall several star-studded, spectacular contributions from our next caller. He's only 14 in Peterhead. I hope, Robert, you're coming to hear me at the Music Hall in Aberdeen the week after next. But in any case, where do you think the situation in Ukraine is headed? Go ahead, son.
Well, I personally believe that, like yourself, that what's going on in East Ukraine right now is the population not wanting to be associated with the far-right Nazis that asked the leader of the Chechen insurgency that murdered children in a Beslan school in North Ossetia to set up shop in Ukraine and drive the Russian people out of eastern Ukraine, and who have just captured Mariupol a few hours ago, and also to escape persecution by the new government, if you can call it that. Don't you think that it's kind of hypocritical of the West to applaud these fascists who recorded a video of them lynching someone and put it on YouTube, and who banned any socialist imagery, but who are quite happy to tolerate Nazi white supremacist symbols and suppressing anti-government protests in the East, while calling President Assad of Syria a sick, psychopathic monster who gassed his own people, in which was a fake chemical attack that we almost went to war over, staged by the BBC, that well-known state propaganda station, which used to be a hub of reliable broadcasting. The same applies to the new junta in Egypt. And as to what I think will happen with Ukraine, I don't know. But I must say, it looks like it may just drift into civil war if it hasn't already.
Well, I think it's justifiable to describe it already as civil war. After all, 90 people were killed by the Ukrainian armed forces in their attack on Slavyansk in the last few days. And in Odessa, the fascists killed 45 in one attack in one building in the trade union headquarters when they set it on fire. That feels very much like civil war to me. And of course, the hammer of the armed forces and the anvil of the fascist irregulars is now being deployed in town after town, area after area in east and southern Ukraine. But Robert, they cannot succeed because the vast majority of the population are against them. And unless they go for a scorched earth policy of murdering hundreds of thousands of people who oppose them in the east and south of Ukraine, they're never actually going to rule it. And if they did seek to solve their problem by truly mass murder and all-out war, then Russia would have no alternative at all but to enter that conflict. Which makes you wonder if this has all not been designed as some kind of trap. Perhaps these Western leaders who are busily telling us how Russia must keep its nose out of Ukrainian affairs have actually so contrived a situation as to try and lure Russia into it. It's going to be a very complex situation, and we must pray that it doesn't end in World War III. Robert, 14 years old, in Peterhead, thank you very much indeed for the call. Let's go to the Netherlands, talk to Sonde. Have Western plots in Syria failed, Sonde? Yes, go ahead. Now you have to have your volume down at 0.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galloway, for having me.
Go ahead, sir. Go on.
Concerning the situation in Ukraine and Syria, both are almost the same, but the only thing I would like to say is to advise those people that are responsible for the problem in Crimea and the problem that is taking place in Syria. These are not problems that just happen. It's happening because people are responsible. It's not natural. It is human beings that are causing these problems to happen. And this is endangering not only the people of Ukraine or the people of Syria, it's endangering the entire world because human being has been misguided we think we are wise, but I think mankind is not wise. Because the Bible and all of the teachings of God says we should love our neighbor like we love ourselves, and we should also do good, and we should not also lie. But people lie, people do mischiefs, and they say they are doing good. And the good is never bad, and the bad is also never good. So people are doing mischievous things, and those particular weapons they have made, and they think these weapons can save them, will be the very weapons that will destroy them. Because these weapons are evil, and evil cannot change to be good. So when you build a nuclear bomb, and you build a gun, all is to do what? To kill people. These are not breads, these are not butter. It's meant to destroy life and destroy properties. It's not something for human beings to be happy with. So
has it failed, Sunday? Is the question I'm asking. Has this Western plan in Syria failed?
Yeah, the Western problem in Syria, we don't know where it's heading to Iran for them, but we do not know how far they are going to stop. Because definitely they are still not satisfied, and people still want to make sure that people die. So this is what surprises me. I can sometimes see people when something happens in the world, like for instance, what happened to the airplane. People went there looking for people that got missing. But then the same people can take weapons and give it to people and destroy human lives, cause people to be displaced.
Yes, you're right.
These things should stop. How can a human being be fooling himself? He says he's doing the work of God, and at the same time you're giving weapons to go destroy men and women and children, and then you say you are a peacemaker, or you are a Christian, or you are a Muslim.
Okay, Sunday in the Netherlands, thanks for the call. Let's go to Canada, in Nova Scotia, and talk to Gary on the Ukraine. Where's it all heading, Gary?
I think it's kind of contending for attention with a number of other issues in the world in which the U.S. and its allies are threatening ever expanded aggression, including what's still going on in the Middle East with Syria, what continues to go on in the region of China. But I do believe that at the moment, because the mass struggle has reached a certain level of intensity, particularly in the eastern Ukraine, the capacity of the Kiev regime and the capacity of its U.S. backers to keep people deluded is very much reduced. And while it's true that we're seeing these really open fascist atrocities take place, such as at the House of Trade Unions in Odessa, it's also true that this is throwing down the gauntlet. Anybody who wasn't clear before as to what the enemy is, now they have no excuse not to be clear. So the struggle in the eastern parts of the Ukraine, I think, is going to go as far as it can on what you could call the legal or political route, what with these elections on May 25th and with the decision apparently from the peoples of the East to go ahead with the May 11th referendum in all sincerity. And I think the result of that May 11th referendum, it's going to come out. I mean, you can't deny what is the sense of the people, what is the sentiment of the population. And it's very clear that it seems to be going in the same direction as the Crimean referendum went.
Certainly looks that way. I mean, obviously, we can't tell just from the actions of small, relatively to the population as a whole, organizations and militants and zealots in every community. But it certainly looks like the activists who've seized the public buildings, their own buildings, that is, in eastern Ukraine, do speak for the clear majority of the Russian-speaking population of the country, which is, as I repeat, 47% of the population of Ukraine. But what do you make of President Putin's call for these referenda to be stayed, for them to be postponed. Were you surprised at that, Gary?
Not so much, because that's an absolutely safe thing for him to propose, because he's not ordering anybody not to do something. He's saying this would be the preference of the Russian Federation at this time. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to go ahead and have the expression of the local opinion in some tangible form. Now, the other factor that complicates all this, of course, in the background are the maneuvers of these oligarchs who have, unfortunately, captured certain sections of public opinion in eastern Ukraine. But the reality is, as you referred to earlier, George, the part of Ukraine that does the work, that manufactures things of value, is overwhelmingly in the east.
Yeah.
There is no Ukraine to speak of without the working people and the industries of eastern Ukraine.
Absolutely right. Gary, in Canada, as always, words of wisdom. Thanks for calling. Ntikala is in South Africa and wants to talk about Ukraine. First of all, how's your own elections going, brother?
Ntikala is in South Africa and wants to talk about Ukraine. First of all, how's your own elections going, brother?
Yeah, the election is very, things were good. I think you are following the situation in South Africa.
Yes.
We don't need to stress about that.
Okay. Tell me what you think about Ukraine.
As you can see that South Africa is going forward. 20 years after the independence, we can say that South Africa is going forward. But I'm from Congo.
Go on.
Yes, I wanted to say like this. I'm from Congo. I wanted to compare the situation in Ukraine and what is going on in Congo. Sorry, maybe you can feel like I want to change your subject, but it's not like that. What I want to say is this one. You can see that Mr. Putin or the USA, they are trying, they are the democratic countries, but they don't know how to show to the people like us from Africa how to go forward in democratic process. I don't know. Today, you are talking about almost 90 people dead in Ukraine, in a certain town in Ukraine. But do you know how many people passed away in Congo last week? They killed those people because they are having wealthy. But why the media, the international media, doesn't show those people? They are killing more people than the second world. They are killing people every day. We want to see those things passing on TV. It's like all the world, they don't know what is happening outside. 90 people we are talking about. But many people, the million, ladies, those are pregnant, they are opening their womb, they are taking children out, they are eating people. But these things, like in Congo, people are not used to violence. Those things are coming from overseas. Today we can see Mr. Ban Ki-moon next to the president of South Sudan. Those things, they are not good. I think we can benefit, all of us, or we can take the wealthy in Africa, bring it in Europe, wherever they want. They can bring also their expertise, their knowledge, but the problem is we don't need any more war. Like
well, look, I think you've made a very powerful case for a debate about African matters here on Comment, and I'm sure that will have been heard by those responsible for setting the agenda for this program. The Congo has lost 6 million people over the last 10 years in 5 separate wars, all of them fueled by foreign powers of one kind or another. Indeed, the entire history of the Congo is one of Western European perfidy. The whole history of the Congo, which involved the murder of the greatest of all African leaders, Patrice Lumumba, may God have mercy upon him, who was murdered by imperialism. The dictator, the greatest thief of the 20th century, Mobutu Sese Seko was placed in his shoes and proceeded to loot tens of billions of dollars of the wealth of the Congo, which is a country that should be fabulously wealthy. The history of Belgian colonialism, Leopold of the Belgians, and the massacres of the people of the Congo during the struggle for independence, and the continuing, until this day, interference in the affairs of the people of the Congo by foreign countries, including Western countries, is a very big and important subject. And I promise you, I'll press for a debate on African matters, not least because the next caller is from Zimbabwe, Alan, who wants to talk about Ukraine. Alan, in Zimbabwe, where is the situation in Ukraine headed?
Hello, George Galloway.
Yes, go ahead, Alan.
I'm pleased to talk to you.
And to you, sir.
Americans have always been a confusion, a confusion pocket, a confusion basket for all nations. They like to create confusion by manipulating the system of all governments. They want to put the people who they want, except not the people who are wanted by the democratic citizens. But let me guarantee you one thing. This time around in Ukraine, the situation is going to escalate to a proportion where they cannot contain. No matter they fund this bogus pseudo-Ukrainian new government, interim minister, these fake people, these puppets, they are not going to stop the voice of the Eastern Ukrainians, because right now the Eastern Ukrainians are in charge of the economy. And even if they give the Ukraine a lot of money to support this bogus government, they won't succeed to topple it off. Why? Because they're now fighting. It's now not only a war against the Ukrainians, it's now a war against the Russians, the Chinese, and all the governments in the support of Russia.
Well, that's not a war that's very wise to pick. We're talking today, I think yesterday was VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. In Russia, today, it's Victory Day, when they recall the triumph against Hitler fascism, and in which the Russian people and the people of the former Soviet Union sacrificed so much. And Russia is far more powerful today than it was when it defeated Hitler. And China is far more powerful than Russia. So those of you who think, and that's the second or third time it's come up tonight, that Barack Obama and William Hague are in a position to threaten Russia and China, you're very, very wrong. Very wrong indeed. But Alan, thanks for the call. Sorry it wasn't as clear as I would have liked it to have been. Ali is in London. Let's hope that's a clearer line. Ali, have Western plots in Syria failed? What do you say?
It's failed. Mr. George Galloway, it's an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you, sir.
I've been following you for many years, and I've been to some of your demonstrations, and I've listened to your videos, and I've seen you when you come to my country, the Lebanon.
Thank you, sir.
What I want to say, George, is we've heard over the last few months that English Muslims who have gone over to Syria to fight the regime and to fight all this, they've come back here, and what I'd like to know is if they'll be sent back to serve time and to be deported there to pay for the destructions and for over there.
Well, no, they won't be because Syria has the death penalty, and you can't be deported to somewhere unless the guarantee is given that there will be no capital punishment, no torture, and no inhuman treatment of the prisoner. But you are onto something, Ali, because actually the government itself, the very government which encouraged these takfiris to go and carry out their murderous deeds in Syria, the government itself has declared that the biggest single threat to British security today is returning fanatics from Syria. And we can't talk about live cases, of course, but practically every day someone is either being arrested at a British airport returning from Syria or are already on trial for terrorist offences in connection to the Syrian plots. And every country, almost in the world, has takfiris who've been to Syria and who are now, that the Western plots have failed, on their way back to their original countries. And European countries are definitely not accepted. In fact, many European countries have larger number of terrorists returning to them than we in Britain have returning to us. And even the United States, Canada, Australia have all got fanatics who are returning. And Saudi Arabia has the biggest number of all. And wouldn't that be an irony of ironies? Ali, thanks for the call and your kind words. Last call, Martin in Zambia on Ukraine. Martin, welcome to the show. Be quick, sir.
Evening, George.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, I'm here to talk about the issue of the Ukraine unrest.
Yes.
Yeah, I fail to understand why Russia should occupy Ukraine borders, and by so doing, they are being a threat to Ukraine's peace and independence.
But what is Russia occupying, Martin? Ukraine's border?
Yes.
You mean Russia's border? You mean there are Russian troops in Russia?
Yeah, and then it's...
No, Martin,
yeah,
Martin, let's get our terms clear. Unfortunately, we've only seconds left. What you've just said is that Russia should not have its forces in Russia. Well, let me tell you something, Martin, in Zambia. Nobody in the world will tell Russia where it should put its Russian troops in Russia, any more than they'll tell the Iranian government where they should deploy Iran's military in Iran, or the Zambian government in Zambia. No country in the world will be told by foreigners that they can't have their own soldiers in their own territory, on their own borders. You've been swallowing far too much in the way of Western propaganda. You need to listen to Press TV more and comment next week, God willing. See you then.
Hello, just comment your name and the country and that number. And just make sure that your television volume's set up to 0. So 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirect me, put through the phone number, and then we'll call you back. Comment. And then can I have your telephone?